Welcome. Yes, please press continue for the recording. We will be recording these sessions for those who cannot join us. So you should be prompted to do that. But my name is Blair Kennedy, and I am the Section 12 coordinator for Illinois. And I am so excited to welcome you to this session. Before we begin, I just want to lay out some Zoom rules. The Mortarboard National Leadership Conference is a place to exchange meaningful ideas. We will respect each other's opinions and allow all to share their ideas freely. We encourage participation from all members. So if you would like to ask a question during this presentation, please raise your virtual hand. You can find that going to the 3 dots next to your picture, or you can also type your questions into the chat. We do have a chat minder today who is joining us. Her name is Sarah Goodman. And they'll be in the chat and answering questions, making sure you're engaged in the conversation, and helping you to find an answer if you have any questions that they cannot answer. So the chat is there for your use throughout this entire session. But it is my privileged and distinct opportunity to welcome you to the session again. I also have the pleasure to introduce you to our 2 speakers who happen to serve as Mortarboard student representative at large on the National Council. Chaela served as vice president at Purdue, and Brendan served as chapter secretary and selections chair at Illinois State before returning the next year as chapter president. Please welcome Brendan and Chaela.
Hi, everyone.
I'm going to share my screen quick.
Thank you.
Are we good, Brendan?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead and start the presentation if you want. Yeah. So, welcome to our declassified chapter survival guide. If you get the reference to Ned's Declassified, please give a thumbs up in the chat. We weren't sure if we're getting too old for people to not remember that show, so wrong. But today we really want to talk about how to actually run a mortarboard chapter. Most people, when they come to conference, whether they'll tell you or not, have no idea what they're doing. And I think that's something we need to normalize, is that a lot of you probably got really interesting handoffs during, especially during a COVID semester, on how to run a chapter. You might not have any idea what's going on. Some of you might have a fantastic foundation already built and you know exactly what you're going to do. But we're here to kind of level the playing field, give you the tricks of the trade from the perspective of 2 people who have been in executive boards of their own chapters, and kind of talk about what it's like, the pitfalls, and things to get you to start thinking about how to run your chapter for real. Because that is, after this conference, what's going to be your responsibility, is to carry the torch and continue to run your chapter. So I'll start us off with some introductions. Hi, I'm Brendan. Blair kind of gave me a great intro. I was in mortarboard for 2 years in my undergrad. So I was tapped in for my junior year as the secretary and selections chair of my chapter, and then the following year I was the chapter president. So I graduated in 2020, right as COVID started, from Illinois State University, and then I moved as soon as I could in end of May, to Iowa in the middle of the pandemic, to start my grad program here at Iowa State. Studying organic chemistry here, so that's me with something yellow. And then I adopted a quarantine cat because I was very lonely in a new state all alone. So that is my cat, Mochi. And he may make an appearance during this presentation. We'll see.
I am hopeful that Mochi makes an appearance because he's the cutest cat. Thanks, Brendan. So I'm Chaela Miner, like Blair said as well. I just graduated from Purdue University this past May, so pretty new alumni here. I was initiated during the, tapped and initiated during the pandemic in 2020, kind of right as things were amping up. So my whole year of service back on campus was throughout the pandemic. So I'm excited to kind of share with you what I learned and help you navigate that, because I'm sure maybe not to the same extent of last year, but you'll probably still be working through some virtual aspects of your chapter as well. So aside from being a Boilermaker, there's a few other titles that are nouns to describe me, I would say. My favorite one being big sister. So you can see there that I am the big sis of 3 younger siblings. Mallory is the one in the prom dress. She is about to turn 20. I'm holding Miss Emma. She's 8. And then we have the little rascal there who's Isaac, and he just turned 4 in May. So our house is really fun. And then next is Tiller. Tiller, today is actually Tiller's 6-month birthday, if you believe in celebrating dogs' birthdays like I do. But he is ornery, he chews on everything. And as you can see there, he's sitting on a John Deere lawnmower. So after graduating from Purdue, I actually relocated to Iowa as well, about 30 minutes south of Brendan in Des Moines, and work for John Deere now as a customer and product support representative. And then the last title or role that I play is fiance. So I got engaged in May and planning a wedding. So that keeps me pretty busy as well. So kind of on the personal side of things, that's who Brendan and I are. And as we said, we come from myself, Indiana, Brendan, Illinois originally. We're both now in Iowa, but we really want to learn about where you all are from as well. Did I just cut out there, or are we good? No? Okay, perfect. It like froze for me. So we want to learn where all of you are as well. So this is our permission for you to take out your phones and scan the QR code, and it's going to bring up a map. And on that map, you can kind of follow the directions here, but we just want to see what school you go to. So where are you at when you're at school? So where's your campus? Thanks, Blair. So we'll take a couple seconds to do that. And if you finish that and we're still waiting, let's get to know you a little bit by having you throw like a role that you play in the chat. So what's a word that describes you? Does anybody still need the QR code? Okay, I'm gonna switch to the map really quick. Overcomer, I like it. Crystal? Slowly popping up here. It's not working for you. Let me throw this link in the chat so that way you can do it through your laptop if you need to. So I put the link in the chat, so that should work. And then you can press this additions button right here and just add a marker. Some are still popping up. So we got Alabama, Texas. Oh, wow, a lot of people on the coast. Kansas, North Dakota. Kaylee's from North Dakota. I just went to North Dakota for work a couple weeks ago. It was really fun. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Oh, cool, somebody from Seattle. So as you can see by the map, everyone in this session kind of represents different geographies, and we stretch far and wide. And that's actually what Brendan and I are gonna jump into today, of just, you know, we're all mortarboarders. We all are trying to figure out how to run chapters, but it looks different because we come from so many diverse places, diverse campuses, different memberships. So we're really going to dive in with you today of what you are concerned about, what questions you have about how to run a chapter, and really just kind of share our honest opinion of and advice, I would say, of what we've learned in our year or years of service. So I'm going to kick it back over to Brendan to talk a little bit about just what our expectations for the session.
Okay, so Blair gave us some fantastic Zoom rules, and we're gonna break about half of them. So this is gonna be an interactive session. Chaela and I are not going to lecture at you, which may be something that will be in other sections where they'll talk more in depth about things. There'll be more listening. This is gonna be pretty much exclusively interactive, which means that we need to hear from you all. So this will be less of a lecture. You should feel free at any moment to unmute and interrupt us. Not going to bother us. It's going to be the point of the session. If no one's talking, we are going to call on you individually. I'm sorry in advance, but we've all been in the Zoom meetings where the professor sits there and asks a question and no one talks, and they just go, okay, we're not going to do that. So we'll call on you. We've got the participant list. There's going to be no bad or dumb questions. Your knowledge range is going to be far and wide. We don't expect you to know everything about running a chapter of an organization. You may have only just learned about, less than 6 months ago, right? Don't be embarrassed if you feel like you don't know enough about Mortarboard. We will help you along the way. That's what this session's for. And there's not going to be a correct or incorrect way to run your chapter. Kayla and I will compare and contrast our methods that we use to run our chapters, and you'll see that there's not a great way either way. There are just ways you can do it, and we will show you what worked for us. It may not work for you, and so you'll need to have some creativity there. Okay? Kick it back over to you, Kayla, if you want to go ahead and advance for us.
Perfect. Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, so like Brendan said, we want this to be really casual, and an open space to kind of just hear your guys' concerns and really be open and honest with you and transparent about what it takes, and address any of those. So our first question and our first topic is just, as you kind of sit and think about creating your plan for this next year, how do you plan to communicate with your chapter members? So we have a few options. I don't know if anybody has ever used a Mentimeter, but we're going to try that out today. We don't need that. So let me go here. Go ahead and get on your phone, your laptop, whatever it might be, and go to menti.com and use the code that's up there. So 4442-2350. And I want you to share with us, as of right now, how do you plan to communicate with your chapters? Is it through email? Is it meetings? Is it group messaging? Is it another source? And we'll have you answer for each. So it's a kind of a scale of 1 to 5. So if you're never going to use email, keep it at 0. But if you're only going to use virtual meetings, put it there as well, or put it on the right-hand side. You guys are figuring it out pretty easily. So meetings, email. It's pretty consistent. I think people are answering pretty similarly if you're kind of watching the bars go. I'm curious if anybody would share what those who kind of put other, what are you thinking there for other forms of communication?
I know for my chapter, we're going to try to start doing more stuff on like Instagram this year in order so people will just kind of see it on their feed.
Yeah, I know there's a really good session tomorrow planned too, Hannah, that the lady who was president of my chapter last year, so who I worked alongside, she's running a social media session tomorrow. So I recommend you doing that. But yeah, social media is a great tool. Has everybody been able to vote? Anybody not been able to vote? Perfect. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. So Brendan and I are going to kind of share with you how we communicated and kind of share with you our tactics there. I would say after seeing the poll, I think the most important thing that you guys probably already understand is that there's not a right or wrong way to communicate with your chapter, but there's also multiple methods to do so as well. So kind of using different platforms throughout the year for different purposes works out really well. So Brendan, I'll kick it out to you for your approach and then I'll share mine.
Sure. So my chapter, the 2 years that I was involved, we used GroupMe pretty exclusively, which I'm sure everyone who's been in any student organization is probably familiar with that app. I do think it's kind of died down in like its use, and its usability is not, was looking back probably not the best. I would recommend now like Slack or Discord if you're familiar with those kind of comments, or like Microsoft Teams if your campus has a subscription for that service as well. Slack is free, and it would allow you to keep your communications all in one place. And rather than using email, you can use like instant messaging type messages. And I think that's a lot faster in terms of communication time. Anything where you can like get out of someone's email inbox, I feel like you're more likely to reach them. I know that you're all probably really involved students on campus, so you know exactly what it's like to get like 100 emails every day, where it's one person asking for one thing, another person asking for another, and then it's just that email gets buried about mortarboard, right? So I think for communicating with some of the busiest students on your campus, that would be my approach, is to use some kind of instant messaging platform, which I think a lot of you kind of said that you were planning to do something similar. But Slack is a great option. Discord is too. And then we always sent out reminder emails the date and time of our events right after our meeting, and then usually a few days leading up to the next one to remind people. So the same day email is always a great idea to get your chapter to like members thinking about, hey, I forgot this was on my calendar, I need to come. If you remind people the day of, something I always talk about is like, why didn't you attend the event? And it's like, I forgot that day. So if you can get a reminder out to them that same day that, hey, this is happening at 5 o'clock, it's a great way to keep your members engaged. To kick it over to you, Chaela.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And I would say we used pretty similar tactics at Purdue last year and found out why some of them didn't work. And I think a good example that Brendan brought up is GroupMe. So we used GroupMe, and we used one kind of group to communicate everything. So whether it be social, like shouting people out because they got an award on campus, or whether it be business related, or whether it's just like, hey, anybody free to hang out? Like, it all happened in one channel, right? So it got really hard to sort through information. Eventually, I think people just became numb to GroupMe and just stopped ignoring everything because some of the things just weren't relevant to them. So then they began missing business reminders and stuff like that. So at the end of the year, our chapters switched to Slack, because who's familiar with Slack? Raise your hand, or virtual hand if you're familiar with Slack. Perfect, cool. So we transitioned to Slack because it has different channels that you can use, and it allows you to, instant message, direct message anybody. So that became a very popular tool that our chapter is now using and has been a lot more effective. But kind of just a couple tips, I guess, that I would share is that worked really well for us is be consistent in your communication. So like Brendan said, our chapter, our president sent out the agenda for the meeting the night before the meeting. Our meetings were on Thursday. So every Wednesday night at the same time, 7 p.m., we got an email from her. She literally just set it up sometime throughout the week to automatically send at 7. So you knew that at Wednesday at 7, you were going to get that information. And on the back end of things, she also followed up immediately after the meeting, or at least the night of, with the action items from that meeting, like a small recap, the minutes, stuff like that. So you kind of got into this groove of knowing what to expect when. And then if any additional emails came from her, you knew that it was kind of pertinent information, if you will. So like kind of pay more attention to that, because she typically didn't like overload our inbox. With that being said, you can't over communicate, but you can over communicate in one platform, I would say. So this is where it kind of goes back to using multiple different platforms. So like Brendan said, I think our generation is kind of slowly moving away from emails and using more of those messaging platforms. So we approached it by use emails for the business related stuff. So like I said, stuff for meetings, if there was a service event that we needed to attend, or different volunteer opportunities, it all went there. But for just like really quick reminders, or like getting people to go somewhere, or just, hey, talk to so-and-so, or hey, learn this today, we were using GroupMe or Slack towards the end of the year, just so that you're not weighing down an inbox, because I'm sure you all have had times like me. I think I have like hundreds of emails right now I need to sort through, and I just never get to them, and they can easily be lost. So you can never over communicate, but be careful the information that you're sharing and where. Google Slides has got me tripping here.
Oh, bye.
So second question, go back to the Menti, the same one. Oh, perfect. You guys are ahead of me here. So second question is, what issues do you anticipate facing when it comes to communicating with your chapter? So I think these are really good. You guys are extremely aligned here. So one-way communication, engagement, we're actually going to talk about that right after this topic, and how to keep your members engaged throughout the year. Ignoring communications, lack of participation, keeping it concise. Engagement just keeps rising to the top, doesn't it? Attendance. I would say there's some pretty common themes throughout here. So lack of engagement or attendance, just ignoring emails, quarantine. Yep, that certainly happened last year. Keeping up motivation, responsiveness, one-way communication. No one showing up. Gigi, what does that mean? I like the Gigi response. So yeah, I think these are really valid concerns, and we're going to have a pretty open dialogue with you actually right now of just having you elaborate a little bit more on those concerns. So what is it about engagement that kind of bothers you or worries you? And maybe we can share some tips to kind of help your members stay engaged. So Brendan, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you. So this is going to be more discussion based. Before Kayla and I talk about what we did to maintain engagement in our chapter, we want to have some of these questions for you guys to start thinking about. And like I said before, feel free to unmute yourself and just start talking, or you can post something in the chat and we'll call on you, or raise your hand, whatever you're more comfortable with. But let's start with the first question. At the end of your year, how are you going to define having like a successful chapter? What is that successful chapter going to look like for you?
I'll say something.
Sure, go ahead.
I think that being able to say that at least the majority of the chapter participated in like big events that were responsible for coming up with specifically like philanthropy events. And I think that would kind of be pretty successful if we could say that our whole chapter came together and was able to do that.
So you're talking about essentially high chapter involvement in all the events. Yep.
Shannon, do you have a method of how you might go about getting that engagement, or kind of the second question? So how do you plan on engaging your chapter, and what concerns do you specifically have around that idea?
I don't have any plans yet. It's like I'm also on the council for my sorority, and it's a big problem there trying to get other members engaged and to get involved in the things that we're planning. And it just seems like it's just a really common theme in a lot of organizations, which I'm very worried about because I feel like the people, at least people that I've met so far in my chapter, don't seem like particularly overexcited about mortarboard.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
For me, I'm the membership chair, so my success is a little bit more looking at that side. I would like to see everyone participating in the selection process, at least to the point of, so how we do it is we originally asked them to provide an application, and I don't want it to end up falling on 3 or 4 members of our chapter to end up reading all of those. So I would like to have some engagement on that aspect before the more select membership committee would, do the interviews and stuff. But I would just like to be more of a chapter involvement on that side.
So you wanted to see chapter involvement from the selections process is what you're hoping to see, Linda, is that right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and Vedant Kulkarni here from Kansas State University. Sorry, I have to keep my camera off. My internet is very unstable.
That's okay.
Yeah, but for me, to define chapter success at the end would be seeing all members of the chapter actively participating in our events, supporting our events, as well as at the end of the year, making sure if we have good amount of people applying for mortarboard, I think that would also define success to me if more people are interested in this organization and the events we put up with, as well as responsiveness from my chapter members, everybody communicating with each other, responding to any messages that I send, etc.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's a very good point. Maya said something in the chat. She said, if we were able to genuinely make a difference in the community, whether it's starting a program for students on campus or nearby, and if students leave the chapter feeling like competent leaders ready for the work world. So yeah, that's something else. It's a great point, is how kind of polling your members to see how they felt is something that we had done in my chapter My first year at the end, we polled our membership to see what they felt like the strengths of our chapter were and what they felt like the weaknesses were, as something that you could like give to the next executive board as like, here's what we did and how our members felt about it, and here's, you know, kind of a framework that you could use and then things that you can improve on that we, you know, obviously can't improve upon because we're graduating, but that is one thing that we did. Brianna, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So I have a chapter of 7 people, including myself. So my biggest concern is creating events that 7 people can run, and possibly like collaborating with other student groups to help us be successful. But I think the biggest thing is just finding things that will interest my members. My goal is to learn what they're excited about and find events that will make them excited to be there instead of something that they have to do. So any tips on that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that leads nicely kind of like into like the second question. It's what ways do you all plan to engage your chapter throughout the year and maintain that engagement? So I won't give away our answers yet, but does anyone have any ideas on what they're thinking for ways to engage your chapter throughout the year? Any plans that you have or things your chapter had done previously that maybe the past executive board had told you about?
Yeah, I think that I come from a really small chapter too. We're only about 40 or 50. And what it's kind of turned into in the past is people just kind of use this for chords at graduation. So we haven't had many events at all. And so I think that this year I'm really going to try to make an effort to at least do something once every other month to kind of ease people into the idea of meeting as a group. I think when we talk about communication, it's kind of hard when like talking about or thinking about my chapter, because like usually it's like you send out an email, you go to a meeting, they're like 15 minutes and that's about it. So really just planning events and things to do will be a good first step for our chapter at William Jewell.
Definitely.
You go ahead.
So something that our chapter does is this past year we kind of started doing a speaker series at the beginning of our meetings. So like during the retreat, we polled our members to kind of see like what type of speakers they would be interested in. And so like over the year, like we did like different workshops on like personal finance during meetings, or like how to build resume workshops, and just kind of like stuff like that to where, and like we even had like a COVID response coordinator come and talk at our meeting, just to try to get students more engaged and like to, you know, make it to where we weren't just having like a 15-minute business meeting, just kind of just to see what students wanted.
For sure. Linda?
So my team also did a little bit of like an addition to just the business meeting. We didn't go for like the speaker side. We went for more of a social side to build that community so that people would then be more interested in doing things, whether that's philanthropic events or anything else together. So we just kind of made it a tradition that after your weekly or bi-weekly meeting, you would all go basically to, like, to the bars, but there were also like options of just hanging out at someone's house, or just kind of a social event was generally something that would happen after the meeting.
Okay, that's a great idea. Logan, I think you're next. And then I'll
Yeah,
hit the
thank
chat.
you. One thing that I'd say is similar to what Linda just said that we're trying to do. This is a new idea for us, and maybe if anyone has any feedback, if they think this is feasible, but try to lay the groundwork and make it more social for everyone before we even get into the business, the actual items of business for our meetings. So it's less of an obligation and more of a welcoming, enjoyable social community that people actively want to come and participate in. So we were thinking about, even before the school year starts, sometime this month, hopefully doing some sort of like, I mean, I'm sure everyone's sick of Zoom by now, but like virtual game night or something like that, so we can start to build a culture. And hopefully, I think one thing that's been difficult for our chapter has been, you know, communication and like building something from one year to the next. So maybe that community can help make that transition easier from year to year.
Right, definitely. I think you all touched on a lot of what Chaela and I already kind of did in our chapters. So some of what we did to keep our members engaged was, and I really suggest this first one, is plan your events for the year as a whole chapter. I know that you have to complete a chapter action plan and you have to put in all the events that you're planning for the year. That should be a living document that's updated. It doesn't have to be, this blueprint framework. So you can complete part of it before your first meeting, but I really suggest meeting with your members and coming up with a plan for events that they're excited about for the year. Because if you just create them and it's not something your members are invested in, they're less likely to show up. We incentivized attendance by using like a point system or a tracking system, and that essentially corresponded to whether or not they got their cords or regalia at the end of the year. And so if they completed by like attending so many events per year and so many service hours, then they were able to actually obtain the graduation regalia. And if your chapter is affluent enough, you could pay for that as well. Ours was luckily able to do that, but I know that's not everyone else's chapter financial situation. We set up small planning committees for major events to help host, make our general members essentially more involved in the planning of the events so that they feel at least more invested in the process. And then we had one member on my executive board who was essentially their major job besides membership selection was just checking in on the members who have missed events and meetings to see if anything was going okay with them personally. And so that's something I really highly suggest is like, I know everyone gets really busy, especially as you get closer to finals week in the first semester. So checking in on students who might be missing more frequently to see how they're doing shows that you care about them and that they were missed. And sometimes it can even bring them back to the chapter if they start to, fade away. I'll throw it over to Chaela for her side.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So I 100% echo Brendan's opinion of planning out all the events in the beginning of the year. So at Purdue, we did a business/social retreat. So it was supposed to be 3 days long. It typically is 3 days long, where you're kind of just in the heat of things the whole weekend, talking about what are our goals as a chapter, and how are we going to accomplish them and in what areas. So honestly, planning out the events for the whole school year of saying, this is when this is going to happen. This is when reading is leading is going to happen. This is when we're going to interact with a different organization to do this service activity, whatever it might be. Or we had a professional development series as well, or that's what we called it, where we had workshops at most of our chapter meetings, just kind of talking through about how to grow our members personally and professionally. So those were all planned out at that retreat. But then having the social side too, because like many of you mentioned, it's so important to not only focus on the business all the time, but like you're going to walk away from this year hopefully with a group of really, really close friends and a really great network to take with you as you graduate college. So that social aspect is so important. Something that works really, really well at Purdue is that we give everybody a job. So Brendan and I are going to share what our org charts look like. So like our hierarchies or whatever you want to call them in just a bit, and it'll make more sense then. But whether you're an officer or not, you have a role. So if you don't hold like an officer position, you're on a committee under an officer. Everybody is. And then it's kind of up to that member of how engaged they want to be in that committee, but that gives them the opportunity to kind of be entitled to sharing their opinion in those situations, and they get to kind of rank what committees they want to be on. And I'm happy to dive into that deeper a little bit offline. We don't need to get so into it right now, but that works so well because everybody has a seat at the table then. Make everyone feel welcomed and valued. So I think this goes back to Brendan. What Brendan was saying is like, if somebody's missing or you can tell that they're not engaged, reach out to them personally. Like that makes a ton of difference, and make sure it's genuine. Don't just reach out and be like, hey, notice you were missing. Where have you been? Like genuinely reach out because you care about them. Or maybe if you're on an exec team, have certain people kind of monitoring, like, this vice president looks over all of like these 10 people, and just kind of have a consistent like point person that reaches out if they notice that somebody's a little off or isn't showing up. I think that makes a world of difference, is those personal connections. And then a lot of you hit on the social events and gatherings throughout the year. And yes, Allison, so socials, here's my warning about socials, and it kind of goes back to making everybody feel welcomed. So I would say Purdue, just being very honest with you, our chapter kind of fell into that. Socials means going to the bar, going out to we have Harry's, like going and doing that after chapter, hanging out there. Well, I think COVID kind of pushed us to rethink what socials should look like in a really, really good way, because going to the bar wasn't our top choice anymore. Actually, I don't think I ever went to the bar with my mortarboard people. But the most important thing that we've learned about that is that not everybody's comfortable going to the bar, not only because of COVID, but just because they're not comfortable in that scene at all. So you're by means of going there is you're kind of excluding members. So we had to re-challenge our thinking and picking socials that everybody was comfortable doing and doing a lot of different varieties. So we had a lot of those virtual game nights. Jackbox games were a huge hit. We played, I don't know if any of you played Among Us when that was a big thing, but we would get on Zoom and we would just play Among Us in a private room. So just like really casual things virtually. And I will tell you, our chapter is extremely close because of those socials. And it really helped us to achieve our goals as a chapter. So I'm happy to share with you, I have a master list of what we did for socials. I'm happy to share that out. Oh yeah, Brendan, that's a good idea, with you all kind of in Hoover or something later, if you want to reach out. One thing I wanted to hit on really quickly, because I know we got about 9 minutes left. One thing I want to hit on is a lot of you talk about this lack of chapter visibility and that kind of being a concern, especially during COVID. So 3 things that come to mind, and sorry, I took notes, so I'm looking down, but 3 things that came to mind for me with that was social media. So getting your chapter's name out just across campus is so beneficial with social media. So, you know, having your own pages, but then really challenging your members to share that out on their personal pages as well, doing challenges that interact with the whole campuses or whole campus, whatever it might look like. The second thing is we actually have a chapter outreach officer whose primary role is to find opportunities across campus that we can get engaged in with other organizations, with other like areas of the university within a specific college or academic success, whatever it might be, ways that we can support them and serve those organizations alongside them to kind of get our name out, but also give back and live out our ideals as well. One of those opportunities that I think was unfortunately really successful for us, unfortunate because of the scenario, of course, but we interacted really heavily with those students who were quarantined because of COVID. So you, as I'm sure some of you, if not most of you know, you can get pretty isolated and lonely in quarantine. So we had a committee that reached out to those members and reached out to those students, literally any student on campus, and we're interacting with them, playing those virtual game nights and just making sure that they knew that we were there as a friend and as a peer who had either been in their shoes, but we're certainly thinking about them. Yes, so I was reading the chat. So those are my things. I think it was Hannah, who asked about how do we keep members engaged. I apologize if it wasn't Hannah. But I think you as a leader just have to continuously think about like what's in it for them, right? Like, yeah, you're amped up about mortarboard because you went to conference and you're like so excited to go back and run your chapter, but that's unfortunately not going to be how probably a majority of the chapter is going to feel. So you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes, like what's in it for them? What are they going to get out of it? And then provide those opportunities to them. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, but I had a lot of thoughts as you guys were sharing. And so kind of moving on into our different approaches of how we kind of manage our chapter. Back to Brendan.
Yeah, I'll touch on this quickly. So our chapter I think had like around 30 to 40 people, if I remember correctly. It's been a year or so it's, forgive me. But I would say that we kind of kept ours really small because I have been in organizations before where you have like a really large executive board, and the problem is that like it moves really slowly. It's hard to make decisions when you have to involve like 20 people and 20 people's schedules. So we kept ours small, which meant it was like a tight-knit group. The disadvantage that we found was that like there wasn't a lot of membership investment from people who weren't on the executive board. So my biggest recommendation would be to, if you're going to keep a small like chapter executive board, then to make it there are like smaller committees underneath that where all the members can be involved in planning like major campus events. But that is kind of like, this is how mine was laid out. We had our like general membership kind of answer to our secretary and selections chair because they oversaw like the membership. They were the one checking in on members who attended meetings. I do think that it worked well for us, but if you're in a really large chapter, this would probably be a bad layout. You'd probably need more people to help manage a larger group. So finding something that seems like it was scaled properly for your chapter, I think, is important.
Yes, so I had a similar chapter size to Brendan. We had 42, and I think we have 41 or 42 this year as well. Sorry if you hear my dog. So we had a different approach where we, like I said, had a lot more officers, but also everybody then was in committees. The committees aren't shown here on this graph or this diagram. But as you can see, our executive board is made up of the president and then everyone in gray. So we had 4 different vice presidents, 1 for each of our ideals, and then the VP of administration. And then we have 2 directors of selection, 1 for solely the transition process, which I think is extremely beneficial because you have somebody who is really focused on acclimating the new members to the organization. And then of course, treasurer and a secretary. Everybody in yellow reports up through a vice president one way or the other. But like I said, going to the committees is under everybody in yellow, there's a committee. So the historian has a committee, Marcom has a committee. So last year there were 3 people on the Marcom committee who just helped us run our social media. And there was always a point person for that officer to go to if they were overwhelmed, if they wanted somebody to have ideas or needed somebody to have other ideas. And then again, just really helped everybody to feel like they were part of the chapter. So that was our approach for a bigger chapter. So quickly before we wrap up and open the floor up for questions and address the ones that are in the chat, we know we threw a lot at you right now, and you are getting a lot thrown at you during conference this whole weekend. But we also want you to know that we're not leaving you after this weekend, and that is Brendan and I's goal. So we are your point people throughout the year. We want you to reach out to us with your concerns, with your recommendations for the National Council, whatever it might be. You also have your SCs, which are dedicated to your specific chapters, and they can be your point people as well. But you're not alone in this. And the amount of times that I relied on Brendan even to ask a question when we were navigating things at Purdue last year was, he probably got annoyed by all my text messages. But that is why we're here, and we really want to make sure that you know that we are available, and please do not hesitate to reach out. So with that, we have a couple avenues of doing so. When the new student representative is selected later this weekend, I will be working. So Brendan's leaving us after this conference, unfortunately, which is very sad. But the new student rep and I will be working together to set up some times for office hours, just to kind of sit down and walk through, or like, have a dedicated time where you can come in and walk through anything that you're concerned about, or just hang out, whatever that might look like. So be looking out for those days and times, and it'll just be a Zoom link that you can hop on. We also are going to roll out a new communication strategy tomorrow. So you guys, thanks for coming to the session. You get the first look into it. So yes, so Brendan just put it in the chat. That QR code is our new Slack channel. So there's a reason that we kept mentioning Slack, because that is the way that the National Council is going, or National Office, National Council, the organization as a whole is going to start communicating. So we are literally that available to you through a direct message on Slack through your phone. So go ahead and scan to join. We are going to ask everybody to join tomorrow. So this lets you kind of get ahead of the game. But there's multiple different channels in there. There's going to be a general channel for, well, you can see it right here, general channel for like any questions. And then we are going to have a specific channel that's a student rep channel where you can literally reach out to us at any time. And we'll be monitoring that really closely. So that is kind of where mortarboard communication is going. So we have a minute, and I talked a lot. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, unmute. We'll be happy to answer, but also get a hold of us on Huba as well.
I think this was put in the chat earlier, but if you could, whether it's in Huva or wherever, just post that document you were talking about the different socials that you had Done.
Yes, I missed that in the chat. So thank you for calling that out, Linda. Could you please include the Slack channel and who's there?
Yes, we can do that. I think Kayla has the link for that. If you want to put that in the chat, like the full link for those of us that can't scan a QR code.
Yes.
I know sometimes QR codes are a little sticky. They don't always work perfectly.
I'll grab that as quick as possible, at least.
I do have a question. If they have further questions for you all, do you mind if they put them in Whova underneath your session?
Yeah, definitely
Yes.
put any questions you have for us in Whova underneath our session. We can answer those there. You can message us directly on Whova. You can email us. I'll put our emails in the chat. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I'll put my...
We are very, very sincere that we want you all to reach out to us, and we don't want the communication to end here. So sorry if we talked a lot. We were hoping this to be really discussion based, and thanks for your interaction. But seriously, we are at your fingertips any time of the day and any time of the year if you have to navigate something challenging.
Definitely.
Or not challenging, if you just want to say hi.
Yeah. So
I
the
think
session
the
will be
recordings
closed.
will be... Where's the session going to be posted, Blair? Do you know that answer?
It will be posted, yeah, on YouTube and on the website. You'll be able to grab that. I want to get all this information out before the session closes in probably about 1 minute. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out. It will take a little bit of time because we're going to be transcribing everything and getting that all set up, just so you know, but it will be posted on YouTube and available on the Mortarboard website soon. But thank you so much, Kayla and Brendan, as former chapter leaders and now current council members. Your perspective and advice have been so beneficial. Check out their other sessions later on in the conference. They would be more than happy to engage with you on Whova, and you have their information there in the chat. So at this time, we welcome you to enjoy a short break before the second chapter rotations start. That'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. Mountain Time, and 12 noon Pacific Time. So you have a little bit of a break until the next session, but thank you so much, Brendan and Kayla.
Thanks, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.